The Weather He Inherited, by Dave Preston. Stay in the room. On the Tuesday, the Treasury released the figures. £15 billion for defence over 4 years. And a hole in the middle of it, 4.7 billion wide, marked to be confirmed at the next budget, in a fair and balanced way. On the Sunday before, the man who would have to fill that hole had been telling a radio audience that he wasn't in all of the discussions. On the 20th of July, he is expected to walk into Downing Street and own every discussion there is. That is the shape of what Andy Burnham is walking into. 2 clocks, running at once, pulling against each other. The political clock is showing him the best few weeks of his career. Sole candidate. More than 200 colleagues behind him. A rival who endorsed him rather than fought. A by-election win that beat its own polling. The strategic clock is showing him something else entirely. A defence commitment already made in his name, and only 2/3 funded. A fiscal rule he has promised to keep. That rules out the obvious way of paying for it. A country whose politics have moved somewhere his party has not yet followed. The drama is all on the fast clock. The danger is all on the slow one. I want to take the visible story seriously first, because it is real, and because pretending otherwise would be the easy trick. Burnham is not a confection. The Makerfield result is the hard evidence. On the 18th of June, he took the seat with a majority above 9,000, when the polls had him scraping a narrow win over reform. What closed that gap was not national mood. It was tactical squeezing. Liberal Democrat and Green voters, in one constituency, deciding, in the privacy of the booth, that this was the candidate worth consolidating behind. That is coalition strength you can measure. It is the thing his supporters mean when they say he is the only figure who can hold the progressive vote together. In one seat, on one night, they were right, hold that, because the rest of this piece is going to press on it hard. And I am not pressing on it because I think it is false. I am pressing on it because a majority in one by-election and a majority in the country are different objects. And the distance between them is where the next 12 months live. Start with the money, because the money is the least arguable part. The Defence Investment Plan committed $15 billion in extra spending. The Treasury has found $10.3 billion of it by reallocating from other departments. The remaining $4.7 billion is listed in the plan's own language as to be confirmed at Budget 2026, which is to say found by Burnham and his Chancellor. This is not a partisan reading. The International Institute for Strategic Studies identified the same gap from the same document. Burnham has said he will keep the current fiscal rules, which rules out borrowing to close it. In theory, there are always more doors, slower procurement, revised targets, a bet on stronger growth, a later change to the rules themselves. But under the commitments already made, and the fiscal rules he has already promised to keep, the realistic options narrow to 2 departmental cuts, or tax rises. The Financial Times has already argued for the first. A new Prime Minister's first defining act before he has even chosen it has been narrowed to a choice between 2 things his voters will not thank him for. Then the mandate, which is subtler and matters more. Burnham will govern on a mandate he did not win. The 2024 landslide was Starmer's, delivered on Starmer's manifesto. And there is no general election planned before it expires. The Institute for Government's own analysis is worth sitting with. His constitutional legitimacy is solid. This is how the system works. A party may change its leader, and therefore the Prime Minister mid-term. It has happened before, and it will again. But his political mandate, they judge, is as vulnerable as any of his predecessors. Those 2 sentences do not contradict each other. That is the point. He is entirely entitled to the office, and entirely exposed in it at the same time. And the exposure does not diminish because the entitlement is real, now electoral reform, where the honesty has to be at its most careful, because this is where I could most easily be unfair to him. Burnham's support for proportional representation is not a convenience he picked up on the way to the leadership. It is a genuine, decade-long conviction. Argued when it cost him something to argue it. I take it as sincere. But sincerity is not a mechanism, and the mechanism he has proposed is a slow one, an independent commission, a pledge to put reform in the next manifesto. Set beside the thing itself, that is a long road. New Zealand took most of a decade to travel from wanting electoral reform to living under it, and New Zealand had a binding referendum, forcing the pace. Proportional representation was not in Labour's 2024 manifesto, which weakens any claim to a mandate to drive it through a resistant House of Lords now. An independent constitutional commentator, writing in Prospect, has already forecast that the reform will most likely be pushed past the next election. by the sheer press of competing priorities. You can believe every word of Burnham's conviction, and still read that timeline and feel something tighten. Here is what those three tensions have in common. And it is the thing this whole piece is circling. Chasing enemies is anti-democratic. That is the principle, and it is sharp on purpose. But a principle can catch you without your meaning it to. Running out the clock on the reform that would make your coalition durable does not require any anti-democratic intent. It only requires the clock to run faster than the reform. The outcome preserved is the anti-democratic one. Whatever was in the mind of the man who let the clock run. The slow road and the fast danger are not on the same schedule. I want to name the mechanism underneath all of this plainly, because it is the part most commentary walks past. Call it compression. British politics is not drifting toward a decision. The decision is being forced by the machinery, not the mood. The blocs are near level. On the early July polling average, the right bloc, Reform and Conservative together, sits around 45%. The progressive bloc, Labour, Green, Liberal, Democrat, with the SNP alongside, sits a shade higher, around 46. This is not a country that has decided. It is a country balanced on a knife. And then you look at where those votes land, and the knife turns out to have only one edge. The same polling average, run through a demographic seat model, projects Reform as the largest party. On 238 seats, with Labour on 165. A model is not a forecast. It assumes today's split holds to an election years off. And a split is a behaviour, not a law. But it is telling you what the current shape converts into. Near level in the country. Nowhere near level in Parliament. The reason is not mysterious, and it is not new. Reform's vote consolidates, and the progressive vote splits four ways across the same seats. 3 of your neighbours vote Reform and pull in one direction. 7 vote for one of 4 other parties and cancel each other out. Reform wins the seat with 3. That is not a mandate. That is first past the post, producing exactly the outcome its mechanics reward. The compression has an asymmetry inside it, and this is where Burnham's specific problem gets sharp. Anger and hope do not decay at the same rate. A grievance vote is patient. It has already decided the system failed it, and it is waiting to be proven right. A hope vote is fragile. It is a loan, extended on the expectation of delivery, and it is called in fast. Reform is running on the patient kind. Burnham, whatever else he is, will be asking for the fragile kind, and the people he most needs to lend it to him have lent it before. Think about who is now in their late 30s and early 40s. They were leaving school or leaving university into the wreckage of 2008. Their entire adult experience of the economy has been the long aftermath, the flat wages, the vanished housing ladder. The public services thinned year on year while they were told recovery was coming. To that cohort, wait, it's coming is not a neutral message, it is a rerun. They've already sat through this film once, and they know how it ends. Which means a vague Burnham program, decent, sincere, underspecified, bleeds hope-based support faster than it dents Reform's grievance-fueled growth. He is not fighting on level ground. He is fighting uphill, into a wind that his own generation's memory keeps blowing. I've watched a version of this up close, and it is not decoration to say so. It is evidence for the mechanism. The people I came up with, in the rave and DJ scene in Bradford in the 90s are, most of them, gone from politics entirely. Not gone to the right, not gone to the left. Gone. Depoliticized. Checked out of the whole apparatus. Because it never once delivered anything that touched their lives. And eventually, a person stops offering their attention to a thing that has never repaid it. That is what asymmetric depoliticization looks like on the ground. It is not a swing from one party to another that the models can catch. It is the quiet subtraction of people from the electorate altogether. And it hollows out the hope block, while leaving the grievance block standing. Because grievance does not need to be delivered to. It only needs to be confirmed. And the pressure does not only come from Reform. Some of it comes from his own left. On 2 tracks that are worth keeping apart. Because the lazy move is to fold them into one. One is a purity test register, that he compromises where he should not. The other is a genuine convergence. From the orbit of the old Corbyn-MacDonald tradition, pulling toward an anti-imperialist foreign policy no sitting Labour Prime Minister can adopt. One is about the register of his politics, the other about its substance. Merged, they become a cartoon of the left. Held apart, they are 2 different problems. And only one of them is really about him, now the hardest question. And I'm going to hold it open, rather than answer it. Because the evidence does not let me close it. Is Burnham's slow-walked Reform timeline a quiet bet that Reform will fall over its own shoelaces? that a party of grievance, handed the responsibility of delivery, will trip on the gap between what it promised and what it can do, so that the durable protection of proportional representation never actually has to be built. Or is the slow timeline simply what the mandate problem forces on him? A man doing the only thing the constitutional arithmetic permits, at the speed it permits. I cannot tell you which. The honest position is that it might be both, and that even he might not be able to fully separate the strategic patience from the genuine constraint. But I will say this much, as plainly as I can. Banking on your opponent's delivery failure is not the same as building your own defense, and a shoelace strategy only works if the other side actually trips. It is a hope, dressed as a plan. And we've just spent 1,000 words on how fast hope is called in. There is real material to build with, if it is built competently and in time. And I want to be fair to that too, because the doom reading is as lazy as the honeymoon reading. Self-identified centrists, asked to choose, prefer a green inclusive government to a reform inclusive one by 18 points. In Lord Ashcroft's polling, that is a coalition waiting to be assembled. The near-level vote share is not destiny, it is raw material. And the seat projection is a warning about what happens if nobody works it. Not a prophecy that nobody can. Tactical discipline can be taught. Makerfield proved it can be done in one seat. The whole question of the next 3 years is whether it can be done in 300. So where does that leave us? Not, I want to be clear, at the rupture. This is not the moment it all comes apart, and anyone selling you that is selling you the same drama the fast clock always sells. Burnham is one of the more radical Labour leaders of recent decades. Sincere in his convictions. Walking into an office he is fully entitled to hold, with real coalition material available to him, and a real chance of using it well. He's also walking into weather he did not make, and cannot change by wishing. A funding gap, with 2 bad exits. A mandate that is legitimate and thin at once. A reform he believes in, moving at a speed that may not beat the clock it is racing. A generation whose hope he needs, and whose hope has been spent before. None of that is a forecast of failure. It is a forecast of conditions. The window is narrow, and it is specific, and it is watchable. Which is the whole point. You can watch weather like this coming. What you cannot do is pretend it is a nice day, because the man walking out into it is smiling. Watch the funding gap. Watch the reform timeline. Watch whether the hope holds. That is the weather he inherited. Now we find out whether he can read it. That was the weather he inherited from Stay in the Room. Thanks for listening. The sources for this piece: the Institute for Government, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Lord Ashcroft's polling, and Prospect among them, are set out in full at the foot of the written version.